Hi, really glad to be here for the second week of the session with all of you. Thank you for coming back. And we have Commissioner Gresham here to talk us through the governor's budget adjustment ask. We have some documents on our website under Commissioner Gresham's name for you to pull up. The one labeled definitions is the one that's suggested for this conversation. And a small bit of housekeeping before we start for folks.
Or language.
Language. It's the first one under Commissioner Gresham's name. For folks who are watching in the wings with bated breath, our room count, our maximum capacity has gone up a little bit through some mysterious air quality testing system that the Sergeant at Arms leads. So more people can fit in the room. So if you have been really excited about getting back in here, we welcome you if you fit. So with that said, Commissioner Gresham, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice to be back in Ways and Means. In many ways, this is kind of a full circle. My first year as a representative, I sat actually in Representative Maslin's chair. Next to me sat former Representative Till on the Healthcare Committee back in the days. It was a while ago. Anyway, nice to meet some of you who I haven't met. I'm Adam Gresham. I'm the Commissioner of Finance and Management. And our group is really kind of two parts. One is the budget development, which is what I'm here to speak about today. The other is what we call FinOps, financial operations. And those are the people who, once you guys vote on a budget and the governor signs the budget, normally when I was a rep, I just went home and assumed everything happened. And it does happen. And the way it happens is the financial operations folks put the budget into our vision system, which is our statewide accounting system. And they monitor it and internal controls and everything. So that's the kind of the other part, more, I would say, subterranean part of our operation. But I'm here this morning to speak about budget adjustment, normally a kind of a snoozer. Budget adjustment historically is a bookkeeper's dream. I mean, it's moving money from here to there with no particular import, except if you're a bookkeeper or a financial manager. The past couple of years, there's been a little bit more excitement around budget adjustment, in large part because we've had a fairly beefy amount of surplus revenue coursing through the state, courtesy of the economic recovery from COVID and our friends in the federal government. So there's been fairly large surpluses that we have been able to use. In addition, there's been fairly large amounts of federal revenue that have come in that we have not anticipated when signing and doing the budget. So we received that federal revenue in this document, and there's not much of the surplus revenue that we put to work in budget adjustment. The vast majority of that will be put to work in the big bill, which the governor will present in a little less than 2 weeks. But in this document, I sent over, or in this budget adjustment, I sent over 3 documents, 2 rather large and complicated spreadsheets that kind of look more imposing than they are. Again, they're just going business department by business department, making some corrections and some adjustments. But also in that package is the language document. So with most bills that we submit a bunch of numbers that show you what we're doing and then language that's behind that. And I thought today, what I would do is go through the language document, since many of the, I think, Ways and Means applicable entries don't show up in the spreadsheet. It's not moving money. It's more correcting language. There are some exceptions to that that I'll point out. But I think in the language document, what I would do is start off with page 5. Recalling that this committee often deals with the education fund, as well deals with tax appropriations and allocations, I thought I would start on page 5 and note that every year, at the end of the year, generally after the budget has closed or after the fiscal year is closed, departments submit what's called a carry forward memo to finance and management. And what that lays out is in their various departments, they have excess money, not always, but typically. Sometimes it's literally just a few $1,000s here or there. I mean, there've been times when it's been $10 or $15 literally. But other times it's significant money. And in their carry forward memo, they say, you know, in this department, we have $2.5 million left over. They ask us if they can carry it forward into the new year and use it. The vast majority of times, the answer is yes, because sometimes departments have appropriations which aren't fully utilized, programs that aren't fully spent out, new programs that maybe they have yet to stand up or are just standing up. So most times the money stays with the departments. But there are some times when we say, no, you know, we gave you $1 million and actually you only needed 800,000. So that other 200,000 that's left over at the end of the year, we're going to revert that to the general fund and use it for other things. Those are called reversions, and we recognize those reversions in the budget adjustment. So this is money left over from fiscal 22 that we revert, we bring back to the bottom line of the general fund and becomes available for other uses. We lay every reversion out, and just for context, this year we had over $500 million of carry forward. That's $500 million just sitting around at the end of the year. And a lot of that, about 60% of it, over $300 million of that, was because we had a lot of one-time appropriations that were for programs that, you know, the budget is passed in May. I think the governor actually signed it June 1st. So there was a lot of money to put to work pretty immediately in fiscal 22, and a lot of it didn't get done. So that money is carried forward into 23 to be put to work. But of that amount, we are reverting $10.5 million. And you see here what those reversions are. And I thought I might point out a couple, largely because they dominate the reversions, one of which is the homeowner rebate, which is about $2.6 million. And the other of which is the renter rebate, which is over $4.3 million. These are the renter rebate and the homeowner rebate have a lot to do with the way property taxes are paid. As you know, many of you know, for renters under a certain income level that meet the household income requirements, they receive call it a break on their property taxes, which is allows them some relief from their rental bills each month. And that is compensated by the general fund. So we compensate municipalities for rebates that are given so that they are held harmless. That happens through the renter rebate. As well, the homeowner rebate is the circuit breaker amounts. So as people probably know, for people under a certain household income level, I want to say $47,000. They pay, and it's there's a sliding scale. I think it starts at 2.5% and goes up to, I want to say 5%, depending on what their household income is. They pay, that's the maximum they'll pay of their household income. Well, we hold municipalities harmless from that. We make up the difference of what their bill would be and what they end up paying. So that comes through in the homeowner rebate. So both the renter rebate and homeowner rebate were underutilized. You know, we make estimates as to how much that program will need, how much money we will use to hold the municipalities harmless. And both those programs are underutilized this past year. Curiously, I thought, well, is this kind of unusual? So I look back and actually in FY21, same. Slightly lower amount, but still same. So
And I think we'll spend some time with tax, both understanding what both of these are better for folks who that would be helpful to, but also understanding how much of this is under enrollment for folks who are actually eligible and how much of this is less folks were eligible than we had imagined they would be. So
Right.
we'll spend some time with tax.
So doing a little homework, I think Commissioner Bolio will be able to, speak on this more fluently. But, his supposition was that there have been a fairly beefy amount of federal subsidies that may have replaced state subsidies or may have eased the burden for renters or homeowners. As well, the economy has been strong in certain areas of the state. Maybe that helped. I mean, these are theories and he can flesh them a bit out for you. But I just wanted to note that there were a fairly decent amount of our reversions of the 10.5 million, roughly, 60% of them came from homeowner rebates and renter rebates, which is a fairly large amount. So skipping to page 19.
Before we skip to page 19, I'm noticing on page 6, there's some pretty large reversions to Ed Fund, special ed formula, which is certainly something.
There is, and thank you for pointing that out. So I think this committee, maybe the Ed Committee, I don't know who oversees kind of that special ed formula and the like, but we changed several years ago the way we pay for special education in this state. I think normally it was done by, I want to say per pupil. And I think they changed that to a census.
And we will, yes.
Grant.
On that, yes.
And I think this 27 million is a combination of money that was held back to pay for the tail of the per pupil amounts prior to the switch to the census amounts. So there was going to be a tail of special ed students that needed to be funded under the old formula, even though we're switching to the new formula. So this is not unusual. They do that in Medicaid also. There's a Medicaid tail that's typically part of the budget to deal with prior year claims that come up in the ensuing fiscal year. So I think that had a substantial amount to do with it. I also believe the 27 million is actually a compilation of a number of years carried forward for 2 or 3 years past. So it's kind of complicated, but it does not mean that we're not spending on needs. I think it means that we withheld more money than we needed at the time. And we also suspected that there would be a larger tail than turned out to be. So I don't think that number will be a consistent presence in our Ed Fund carry forward or reversion. Keep in mind that any money we revert from the education fund stays in the Ed Fund. We're just taking it from an appropriation and we're dropping it to the bottom line. So this money, which I think in total, $45 million will be available for usage in the Ed Fund in this fiscal year, fiscal 23.
Just for point, the system we're transitioning out was fee-based on service.
I didn't know the right terminology.
Yeah, right. We were fee-based on service. I mean, in theory, now that we do census block grant, there really shouldn't be reversions any longer in the special education piece.
In theory.
Yeah, in theory.
So, but that, I mean, 45 million is a fairly large amount to revert. I mean, I wouldn't count on that in future years. It's nice to have, but. So if there are no further questions, I found on page 19, there is what I would call a technical adjustment if you look in the middle of the page, you see Acts and Resolves number 183. So Act 183, there is an amendment that is suggested that deals with an Ed Fund appropriation made to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. I would note that in Title 16, 4025D, the uses of Ed Fund are very prescriptive. In other words, I can't, as a budget commissioner, decide that I want to use the Ed Fund to pay for housing or to pay for anything that's not PK through 12 related. So occasionally that happens. And to do that, you have to not withstand statute. In the final, I think that was is Act 183, was that the yield bill? I don't remember which bill that was. Act 183 from last year, was that?
But are you talking about the tech center?
I'm looking at we're amending Act 183 and I don't remember what bill that was. I think it was the yield bill, but there was.
Act 183. Oh.
But there was a bill that, dealt with education policy. And it was to. Okay, so that would have been the economic development bill.
Yeah, that's what it was, yeah.
In that bill, what they did was they took education fund money and they meant to invest in career and technical education.
For housing.
Right, for
Yes.
housing, kind of education on building, kind of nuts and bolts. So it's education related, but not, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board is carrying out this task. And so the money is actually being appropriated to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, which is not a typical Ed Fund appropriation. So there should have, and this was a bit of a debate with Finance and Management, Joint Fiscal Office, and Ledge Council. I think there was some difference of opinion about whether this needed notwithstanding language. Because, the good news as a property taxpayer is if you violate the uses of Ed Fund money, evidently it eliminates the property tax mechanism. So in theory, all of us our obligation to pay our property taxes was eliminated by this violation. So
I appreciate you saying that on YouTube.
So I was feeling all that much richer. Anyway, I think this, and again, it's debatable, but I think it's smart to just put this notwithstanding language in there and, put the issue to bed. So that's why this is here. When you use Ed Fund money and again, if you read that Title 16, 4025, it's very prescriptive on the uses that Ed Fund money can be, on Ed Fund money uses. So this notwithstanding is meant to acknowledge, we know that there are very prescriptive uses, and in this case, we are using it for something other than what is in the statute. And in fact, it has to do with education, but the way we're going about it is a little bit different. So we should not withstand statute.
Mr. Grisham, does that mean that this program hasn't started at all, because you were waiting for that language?
I know. And however, I think it is imminent. Because we asked about this. We said, well, are you guys, is this going to happen imminently? And evidently, so there's fall semester, and that, you get the students and they are put in this class, they are given tools and equipment and so on. So I think the money will start to flow, but I don't think it has yet.
Okay.
So anyway, we looked into that too. It's kind of an interesting question.
I remember vaguely when this came across, the House floor. And I thought it was, okay, I guess this makes sense, but I'm not sure exactly. But yeah, I think you're right, Adam. It was intended to be used in tech centers to get mechanical skills, equipment skills up and running for guys that are gonna go build affordable housing.
For anyone.
Guys and gals,
So I think there's some startup time. So our supposition or our theory was that this money actually wouldn't start flowing yet, but it will shortly.
Thank you.
So on the next page, page 20, this is where I will ask for your institutional memory, because also in Act 183, Section 54. So in the Economic Development Bill, there was a section of the bill that boosted the downtown and village center tax credits, which I believe this committee is quite familiar with. But the way it was done was mysterious to us anyway. I think, and we've spent probably all too much time trying to parse this out. I was not in the room. I'm sure you guys were in the room, although I think it was done in Senate Economic
I think it
Development.
was done in House Commerce.
House
And
Commerce.
it was pretty extensive conversations
Right.
with us and Chris Cochran as part of that at the Agency of Commerce. The idea is that we were walling off the money for the neighborhood development areas separately to see how that went, to make sure that it wouldn't infringe on the success of the regular downtown and village tax credit program. Sounds like that's not how the language read in the end of the day.
Well, for your information, Madam Chair, I actually reached out to Chris Cochran, so
I'm sure you did.
you guys would be more than welcome to have him in here. He said he thought that the intent of the committee was to increase the tax credits available by $2.45 million. But that was not the way the bill was written. The bill was written as an appropriation to a program. And
That was quite explicit and purposeful, yes.
so, I'm sure the House Appropriations Committee is going to send this over to you guys.
Thank you.
And we, for your reading pleasure, redid the language to make it simply a boost in the tax credits, which is, we thought anyway, we supposed was the intent of it. But to the extent that we're wrong, I think that will be an interesting debate. But the amendment that we have in this document is to just boost the tax credits for the cap now is $3 million annually. And so what we do is we boost it by the amount of the appropriation, which was 2.45. We boost it to 5.45 million for FY23. And then whatever isn't used, if to the extent that there are, capacity limits or whatever, we allow to be used up in FY24.
And we did it as an appropriation to the NDA specifically as a way of creating sort of an, what felt at the time to be an elegant, essentially pilot that sunsetted.
Well, it's appropriated to the downtown and village center tax credit program.
Yes, to be used for ND, neighborhood development.
It might be nice to hear whether the pilot performed as intended.
Yes, I imagine that we can have Chris in to discuss this. Yes, agreed.
Because that was clearly Janet's intention was to keep the money where we wanted it to go. And that would be to see what happened with it.
That concludes what I found that is Ways and Means, what I thought was Ways and Means applicable, but I am happy to answer other questions you guys have on the budget adjustment, or maybe if I've missed something.
Further questions from me? Thank you.
I have one little tiny question. It may be a little too granular, but in the number 126, section 5B at the bottom of page 21.
On the page.
A service pilot planning grant. Three regions of the state have been determined, or are they still up for?
So I think they have in mind the regions. I don't know whether they've been locked in, but I think they do have in mind the regions.
Matter of talking to the right person at Dale to find out what those regions are. Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
And then since we still have 2 minutes, the relationship of the Department of Labor to their IT system is an area of interest to the Ways and Means Committee because we can't do anything to the trust fund until the IT system is fixed, essentially. So I noticed that they seem to be spending less money than imagined. They're not for IT project as quickly.
Oh, no, they are going forward with their IT project. I don't, where do you have that they're spending less?
It was somewhere in 80,
Is it in the reversions?
I think it was in the reversions with ADS somewhere.
So there is
Page 3. Oh, maybe it's more money. Sorry.
is that the 11.8?
3 million. Bottom of page 3.
So yeah, that's actually an addition.
Great. Sorry, I was scrolling quickly while you spoke.
That was, I believe the reason this is here, that was in the, I want to say the waterfall for the budget. If there's extra money left over, I think both the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Department of Labor were going to receive. And so since there was additional surplus money, they did receive. And you see it here.
Bless you. And thank you very much for joining us this first time. Looking forward to many more visits.
Yeah, so the governor delivers the budget on Friday, January 20th.
And then we'll see you soon after that.
And because it's always my mission to provide great surprises for this committee, I'm sure there will be a few.
I think we do our very best policy work when we're surprised. So thank you for that. See you. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
And folks, we're going to be back here at